testing, volume as well as functional. We use load runner for the web-based portion of the test. And for IVR, which is phone banking, we use voice over IP. So Skype dialing into the voice network, right? So you could use Hammer or the new name of Hammer, whatever it is. But those are a little bit more expensive, and we found that it was easier to cut costs with a Skype. We test multiple different protocols that were also part of the mix, not just web. But if it's only web, there's plenty of freeware and others that you can use. But we stuck with the bank's preference because at that point in time, at some point in time, the bank wanted to take the scripts built, not that load runner scripts live more than 1 or 2 release cycles, but they wanted specific technologies, and they picked load runner, and they picked QTP for automation. So on test automation, I'll only talk about what is different for a transformation as opposed to standard automation. So when you have these 20 OEMs, each one building their piece, you don't really know which piece will come to you first. You start building your framework so that, of course, it works across all these applications. And you start building pieces that make sense. Anything to do with test data, anything to do with data creation, anything that you can do in terms of the functionality that's available through this application. And you ensure that you can knit these test cases end to end to build your entire process-based testing when the entire application has arrived. Okay? One of the things to consider when you have a new banking implementation is you have to test the configuration, certain setup parameters, and those vary by application. So that becomes your pre-UAT check. When you have 20 applications and each application has its configuration parameters, if you don't adopt some sort of automation around that testing, it may become your bottleneck. You may not be able to get past that configuration testing phase, and then everybody will become anxious to start UAT. But if you start UAT and your configuration of the software is not correct, you would end up with incorrect results. And so automating it makes a lot of sense, even though it's a one-time activity. Typically you think, oh, automation, I should do it if I'm doing it 10 times. Your configuration testing, you're not doing it more than once. But because there's so many different parameters to check, it makes sense for you to do it as much through automation as possible. Functional testing. So we talked about requirements-based testing, followed by process-based testing. And the previous speaker actually gave a great example of how you can start off with a CASA account, and then eventually you might need to get a loan and so forth. You can test pieces of each application that are available. Can I create my account? Can I get a loan sanction? But then when everything is all available, you start from scratch and finish the process. It's the same customer that walked into the branch, and you created an account for that person. This person is now applying for a loan. It gets sanctioned. The KYC gets done. And then you go through the collection and so forth. And people who understand banking to be able to devise your end-to-end process tests. So we had bankers in our team who actually came up with a process-based test. You certainly need to have people that are cross-trained. So because you have so many different areas of the application, if you just have your core banking, retail banking experts, and then your corporate banking are a different team, and then you have some that only deal with portfolio management. Now, depending upon where the defects arrive, you will end up with keeping one team idling while another team is super busy and they don't have time to go home. Cross-training as much as possible, allowing people to get career enrichment. What do I do as a tester? I become a BA at some point in time. This soul searching that has happened earlier in the conversations, right? I have many routes as a tester. I can become a BA. How do I become a BA? How do I become a banking expert? I learn different processes. I learn different flows. Cross-training is a perfect way of getting every tester excited about what they do next. And so all of this becomes important because as various things move around, you need to be flexible with your team. So I know I have kind of made up for the short presentation. I think we didn't have enough time for the 1 hour that I had. Any questions? I know we asked questions along the way. Yes, please. was actual. It took 300% more time than the bank originally thought it would take. All came into the picture. How long does this entire cycle take from plan to completion? And the second question is, given that we have all of these metrics behind how people operate, how often did we face being a QA cop on Dev Street, one way to rephrase it, during the entire software test lifecycle? And so the answer is every day. It was life on QA Street, being a cop and saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions and time. I appreciate everyone's attention.
Thanks, Dr. Kishore. The next session is definitely on with Rahul Verma. He's going to talk on testers must learn programming. But before I introduce him, let me talk about what's happening in the other track. So we have Dr. Shankar Ramamurthy's session now, instead of the session which is planned, which will happen later. So Dr. Shankar Ramamurthy is director of Amdocs. He's going to talk on lean software engineering for delivery excellence, using Scrum Band. So on this note, may I invite Mr. Rahul Verma. He's the director and chief technology officer of TestMile, one of the sponsors for this event. TestMile specializes in various aspects regarding web security and performance testing, and also at the test strategy level. Rahul has been one of the most popular speakers in various software testing conferences. He spoke last year, and he was amongst the top 5 best speaker in the conference. So on that note, would invite Rahul. He'll be talking on testers must learn programming. A very different kind of presentation. He always surprises all of us. Over to you, Rahul.
Thank you. Testers must learn programming. It's a shame that I have to stand here. A person as small as me has to stand on this stage and yearn to your senses that testers must learn programming. It's the same shame which our industry should have, that for the last 10 years we have not been able to convince colleges that testing is a respectable profession. They still want to become developers. I am not a person who writes or talks testing fiction. It's a very, very deliberate presentation. Whatever content it has, it is based on my interaction with hundreds or thousands of developers, testers across my experience. And so if some of you find that, oh, it is me on this presentation, it's deliberate. That's how these talks anyways should be. What's going to unfold, in other words, what's the agenda? It's very simple. We're just going to have a conversation. The counter arguments first. This is not a topic for a presentation. I would have loved if Unicom step in. These conferences in India, they would have arranged a panel discussion at least for this topic in the last 10 years. They could have arranged one-to-one debate where there's a person sitting opposite to me who thinks that testers should not learn programming, and he or she has very, very strong points, and we have 2-hour, 3-hour debate with audience voting before and after. That I would have loved. So, because it's a paper presentation, it's a talk at a conference, what I've tried to do is, I have went around the web, I have tried to find very, very strong arguments against this topic. Now, because of my biases, I may not have done justice to that, but as much as I could. Because unless I bring in good arguments against this topic, how do I think that I can build a good case in favor of the topic? So it's a debate going on within the presentation. Of course, it would be followed by my opinions. The hypocrisy, one of the key elements, there was a panel discussion today in the same room. One of the points which was not addressed by our leaders was hypocrisy. These multiple tracks where next generation testers should be. One of the points which we always forget is how hypocritic we are. After all the right measures are taken in a company, they die because we are hypocritic people. We don't come forward. We don't confess to it. There are other presentations where Anand was asking about continuous integration, where do we stand, and whenever there's a good thing, we raise our hands. Oh, we are great, we are great. We know the realities. We know the ground realities. We are better than what we position ourselves as. The final question, not an argument. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a topic. I'm not very proud today that I have to give this talk. I was not proud when I wrote a blog post on it 4 years back when I got a thrashing from the industry. You're a fool, you're this, you're that. I was not proud even then. This topic is a shame. How many things have to happen to you before it occurs to you? So the question is, how many things in my own experience should happen to me before it occurs to me that I should learn programming? How many really? How many conferences would it take? How many people, how many motivators would it take? How many project contexts would it take when I realized that I should learn programming? Enough of them happened to me, luckily very early in my career. I'm not going to go through the list on the right-hand side because one of my friends sitting in the room suggested to me last time, don't talk about what you have done. Let your work speak for yourself. Thanks, Divakar. So this slide is dedicated to you. I'm not going to go through that list, but that's what I am. Those are the different contexts. So if I stand here with very strong opinions, that's because that's my story. My story could be different than yours, but then that's who I am, and I have no way to undo my own experience. So this presentation is biased. I am biased by my own experience, aren't you? So when I say testers must learn programming, please don't take it personally. I'm not pointing fingers here. It's not about you. It's about that fictional tester somewhere. The profession called software testing, those glory days of how proud a software tester should be. The pictures which we create in our books. I'm not a computer science engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession, but I understand there was this Pressman book in computer science graduates book where testing is still one chapter. Even in that one chapter, at least it is mentioned that testing should start as early as possible. It's a shame that as an industry, we are not doing even that justice to our profession, which that single chapter does. All right, my story, my opinions, I could be wrong, I could be right, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter anymore, really. The counter arguments first. These are actual statements. I have removed the names, not because I don't want to share copyright with them or acknowledge these statements to them, but through my lot of blog posts, lot of work so far, people have come to misunderstood me that it is about people. I point fingers at people. I talk against James Bach. I talk against Cam Kannan. That's not my goal. That's not my goal.